we must stop regarding unpleasant or unexpected things as interruptions of real life. The truth is that interruptions are real life. This raises an important question. Have you ever felt like your prayers were met with silence, as if heaven itself had closed its doors? Perhaps you have cried out to God in your moments of despair, only to be met with stillness. The longing for change, the desire for answers, and the ache of waiting can weigh heavily on the soul, leaving you feeling drained and weary. Does it seem like the very things you've prayed for remain distant, as if your words have evaporated into the air with no sign of return? But what if this silence isn't a sign of abandonment, but rather a signal of preparation? Could it be that God is using this waiting season to mold you, to shape you, and to build your character for something far greater than you could ever imagine? Beloved, don't lose heart. God is saying that your victory is near, even when everything around you seems to suggest otherwise. You see, Lewis reminds us that the moments we often regard as interruptions, the waiting, the silence, the delay are, in fact, the very stages upon which our greatest growth occurs. It's during these times that God is closest, even when He feels distant. Think of the deep yearning within you, the constant prayer for change, the overwhelming fatigue that comes from holding on to hope for so long. You may be at the point where you feel like giving up. You might be questioning whether God hears your cries at all. But here's the truth: He does. Not only does He hear you, but He's already at work behind the scenes, orchestrating something far beyond what you can see. Your disappointment in the wait is not a denial of His promise. The tension you feel is a reflection of your desire for the better, for the breakthrough, and for the relief that only God can provide. In the book of Psalms, David cried out many times to God, asking, "How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever?" Psalm 13 verse 1. But David, despite his despair, always returned to faith, believing that God's timing, though mysterious, was perfect. This is where you are now. The stretch of waiting is painful, yes. The nights feel longer, the days feel empty, and the temptation to walk away from faith grows stronger. Yet, this very season is refining you. It's strengthening your endurance, deepening your trust, and preparing you for a victory that is closer than you realize. So, what do you do now? You rise. You rise in faith, even when your heart feels like sinking. You rise in hope, even when despair tries to wrap its cold arms around you. Just as C.S. Lewis explains, it is through hardship that our deepest desires are refined, and it is through these interruptions that our souls find their true strength. God is not done with you yet. The journey is not over. These moments of doubt, frustration, and exhaustion are part of the process. Your breakthrough is being crafted by the hands of a loving Father who has not forgotten your prayers. Stay with us. Don't let go of hope, and don't turn away just because the answers haven't arrived yet. God is not finished writing your story. Continue to listen as we explore more of how God works through these periods of silence to bring about profound transformation in our lives. Before we move forward, I encourage you to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement could be the encouragement someone else needs, and together we can walk this path of faith, reminding each other that God's timing is always perfect, even when the wait feels unbearable. Can I get a shout of praise from you? C.S. Lewis once said, "God allows us to experience the low points of life in order to teach us lessons that we could learn in no other way." Have you ever felt that your waiting, your prayers, and your hope have all led to nothing? Does the silence feel like a void, making you question if God has forgotten your pleas? In these moments of stillness, it's easy to let doubt creep in and think that your waiting is in vain. But could it be that this very silence is God's way of preparing you for something much greater than what you've been praying for? The discomfort you feel, the weight of anticipation pressing on your heart, is not a sign of failure or abandonment. Instead, it's the space where God is refining you, molding your character, and strengthening your faith. Just as Lewis often reminded us, growth comes through trials, and these seasons of waiting are a tool in God's hands to prepare you for the victory He's already promised. The darkest hour, as the saying goes, is truly just before the dawn. And though the night feels long, your breakthrough is closer than you think. It is in these moments of perseverance, where your strength is tested, that your spirit is sharpened for the battles and blessings ahead. So ask yourself, what are you holding on to in this season? What is it that you desire from God? Is it healing, a restored relationship, financial breakthrough, or peace in the middle of chaos? Whatever it may be, believe that God is already at work, clearing the path for you. He has not forgotten you, beloved. He has not turned his face away from your pain or your prayers. The fact that you're reading or hearing this message is not a coincidence, it's a divine reminder that your victory is near. This season of waiting is the proving ground of your faith and trust in God's perfect plan. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "I am sure that God keeps no one waiting unless he sees that it is good for them to wait." Have you ever wondered why the waiting feels so unbearable, as though time is slipping through your fingers with no answers in sight? Perhaps you've questioned if your prayers are being heard, or if your efforts are in vain. It's in these moments of silence and uncertainty that doubt can creep in, making you feel as though you're on the edge of giving up. But could it be that this waiting, this challenging season, is a part of God's greater plan to refine you? Beloved, don't mistake God's silence for his absence. Just as Lewis reminds us, waiting is not punishment but preparation. The pain you're feeling, the questions swirling in your mind, and the desire for change are all parts of the journey towards something greater. Your Father is working tirelessly behind the scenes, aligning everything in your favor. Although it may seem that your prayers are met with silence, God is intricately weaving every thread of your life together for good. Can you trust that his timing is perfect, even when it feels like everything is moving too slowly? The waiting may test your faith, but it's also strengthening it. Every challenge you face, every tear you've shed, and every prayer you've whispered is not wasted. They are shaping the person you are becoming, deepening your understanding of your purpose. Just as a tree grows stronger through the resistance of the wind, so too does your character grow through trials. The victory you're waiting for is not far off, it's just around the corner. You are being prepared for something far more beautiful than you can imagine. So, as you walk through this difficult season, hold on to hope. Don't give up. Stay steadfast in your faith and trust that God's plan is unfolding exactly as it should. Your breakthrough is coming, and the person you're becoming through this process is stronger, wiser, and more resilient than you ever thought possible. Stay with us on this journey of faith and let these moments of waiting transform you. Before we move forward, I encourage you to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Your story of faith could be the light someone else needs to keep going. Together, we can remind one another that God's timing is always perfect, even in the waiting. C.S. Lewis once reflected, "God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our consciences, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world." Have you ever felt like the very weight of life's uncertainties is shouting at you, drowning out any sense of clarity or hope? Perhaps you find yourself trapped in the waiting, unsure why God seems to remain silent in the midst of your pain. How do you endure when the promises seem delayed and the answers you seek feel distant? But what if this period of waiting, this crucible of uncertainty, is exactly where your faith is being refined? The struggles you face today are not meaningless. Just as C.S. Lewis noted, pain has a way of waking us up to deeper truths. Your perseverance is not in vain. These moments of delay are doing something profound within you. They are chiseling away at the parts of you that aren't yet ready for the blessing. Like a sculptor carefully shaping a masterpiece, God is using these trials to form a stronger, wiser, and more resilient version of you. Can you see it? Each day of waiting is like the delicate stroke of the artist's hand, preparing you for the season where you will step into your answered prayers. The waiting, the uncertainty, the discomfort, they are all part of a divine process. Every step you take, no matter how small or slow it feels, is leading you closer to the victory God has prepared for you. Do not believe the lie that God has forgotten you. Instead, trust that he is using this time to ready your heart, to prepare you not just to receive your blessing but to cherish and maximize it. When the time comes, you will look back and understand that the delay was not a detour, but a part of God's perfect plan. Beloved, God has never been in the business of taking from you. He only removes what would hinder your growth or derail your purpose. What you perceive as a loss or delay is actually His hand guiding you away from things that would keep you from living out the life He has designed specifically for you. How comforting it is to know that every painful step is guided by a loving Father who is orchestrating your path to ensure you are not only ready for your victory, but also equipped to glorify Him in it. Throughout the Bible, we see God making promises of good things and fulfilling them: long life, prosperity, health, peace, guidance, protection, and eternal life. A humbling verse in the Bible says, "He who did not spare His own Son, but gave Him up for us all, how will He not also, along with Him, graciously give us all things?" Romans 8 verse 32. How humbling is that? Always remember that greatness is prepared for. If you desire greatness, you must undergo the necessary training to guarantee access to it. His blessings make one rich and add no sorrow. For you to receive your victory in God, He must complete His work in you, and to do this, you must go through the process. What are the signs that show your victory is near? If you pay attention, you will see these signs attesting that your victory is near. C.S. Lewis once said, "Relying on God has to begin all over again every day, as if nothing had yet been done." This wisdom challenges us to ask ourselves, have you ever found your faith wavering in moments of silence or hardship? Have you ever wondered why, despite all your prayers, the answers seem distant and the path forward remains unclear? Faith, like any muscle, needs to be worked, stretched, and exercised through challenges. But how do you persevere when your soul feels weary and the weight of your unanswered prayers feels heavier with each passing day? Faith is not something that develops instantly. Much like building physical strength, it requires a steady commitment, a willingness to show up, even on the hardest days. You wouldn't expect your muscles to grow after one workout, so why expect your faith to be steadfast without trials? Each moment of doubt, every question left hanging in the silence, is an opportunity to lean deeper into God's promise. God is not ignoring your cries. He is refining your spirit, molding your heart, and preparing you for the blessings He has already set aside for you. Think of Abraham, who was called by God to leave everything familiar, to venture into the unknown. For years, he waited for the fulfillment of God's promise, facing doubts, fears, and overwhelming uncertainties. Yet, through each trial, his faith was not weakened but strengthened. He was not just waiting for a promise, he was being prepared for it. Can you see that the delays in your life might be part of God's greater plan for you? What feels like a standstill is, in fact, the groundwork for your future. The process of spiritual growth, like any meaningful transformation, is gradual and requires both patience and perseverance. In the moments when the results of your prayers seem far off, God is at work, rearranging your life for a breakthrough that exceeds your expectations. But are you willing to endure this refining fire, trusting that the gold within you is being formed? Perhaps right now, you are tired of waiting. Perhaps your faith feels fragile, and you question whether you can keep going. But God is inviting you to stay the course, to trust Him beyond what you can see, just as Abraham did. Lewis also reminds us that faith is the art of holding on to things in spite of your changing moods and circumstances. This season of waiting is not wasted. It is crafting a deeper, unshakable faith within you, one that will stand the test of time. So, what do you do when the answers seem delayed and the promises feel far off? You keep moving forward. You keep trusting, because God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't align with our expectations. Know that in the silence, God is at work, rearranging cycles in the Spirit, aligning the pieces of your life for His greater purpose. Beloved, don't give up now. Continue nurturing your faith, much like an athlete trains their body. With each step of trust, you are building spiritual resilience that will carry you through the most challenging seasons. Stay with us as we delve deeper into how God strengthens us through trials. And before we continue, take a moment to like this message and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's walk this journey of faith together, lifting one another up as we wait for God's perfect timing. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Faith is the art of holding on to things in spite of your changing moods and circumstances." Have you ever found yourself in a season where everything seems to be falling apart, where the promises of God feel distant, and your faith is being stretched beyond its limits? This is a moment of testing, a season where God calls us to walk by faith and not by sight, to trust not in the fleeting evidence of what we see, but in the unshakable truth of what God has spoken over our lives. Have you been tempted to let go, to question whether God is truly working behind the scenes when all you see is the chaos of your current situation? In moments like these, it's easy to feel weary, to wonder if your prayers are being heard, and to lose your spiritual fervor. Yet, the Bible reminds us in Romans 12 verse 11 to never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. The enemy would love for you to grow tired, to let frustration and doubt overtake you. But God is calling you higher to a place of renewed strength, where your trust in Him becomes the anchor that holds you steady through the storm. Those who trust in the Lord will never be put to shame. Even in your weakest moments, He is lifting you from the depths, placing His light before your feet to guide you through the darkness. Perhaps right now, you are questioning the purpose of this trial, asking why God hasn't yet delivered you from the hardship. But what if this season is not meant to harm you, but to shape you? What if God is using this time to work on your character, preparing you for the victory that lies ahead? Just as C.S. Lewis observed, our faith is often tested in the fires of difficulty, and it is there that our deepest growth occurs. God is not absent in your pain. He is refining you, building within you patience, tenacity, and self-control, preparing your heart and mind for the blessings He has in store. Think about the moments when you've taught a child to say thank you before giving them a gift. In the same way, God teaches us gratitude and humility before He places His gifts in our hands. He does this not to delay, but to ensure we are ready to receive. Are you ready? Are you prepared for the transformation that God is setting before you? You are on the cusp of something great, and now is not the time to retreat. It's a time for deeper trust, greater surrender, and an unshakable belief that God is working all things for your good. C.S. Lewis once said, "God doesn't want something from us. He simply wants us." Have you ever thought about why God sometimes withholds certain blessings? What if it's not because you are unworthy, but because your heart is not yet ready to receive them? Imagine handing the gift of leadership to someone who hasn't learned humility, or entrusting a child to someone who lacks patience. God, in His wisdom, doesn't operate like that. He doesn't just give blessings because we ask. He prepares us first, shaping our character so that when the gift arrives, we can handle it with responsibility and grace. Perhaps you have been praying for something deeply, something that weighs on your heart daily. You wonder why the answer hasn't come, why God seems silent. But could it be that the delay is His way of refining you, teaching you, and ensuring that when you receive what you've been asking for, you are able to steward it well? God is not just in the business of answering prayers. He is also in the business of transformation. He is molding you to be a vessel capable of holding the gifts He has planned for you. The waiting period can be agonizing. You may feel like God has forgotten you, or that your prayers have gone unheard. But God is never late. His timing is perfect. The roadblocks you feel right now are not a sign of denial, but of divine preparation. He is clearing paths, recalibrating your desires, and aligning your heart with His perfect will. Just as C.S. Lewis describes the process of sanctification as God chiseling away at our imperfections, this period is one where God is shaping you into the person He knows you can be. So, the question becomes, are you ready to receive what God has for you? Are you allowing Him to work on your heart in this season to prepare you for the blessings He has stored up for you? It's easy to rush ahead, to want answers immediately, but God is never in a hurry. His process is deliberate, ensuring that when the blessing arrives, you will be fully prepared to handle it in a way that brings Him glory. As He works, remember Psalm 46 verse 10, "Be still and know that I am God." Being still isn't passive, it's an active trust in the one who sees the bigger picture. Lewis also spoke about how suffering and waiting often lead to deeper joy and understanding. What we endure in these times strengthens our spirit, transforming us from merely children of God into joint heirs with Christ. And when He is finished working in you, you will not only understand Him better, but you will also find joy and fulfillment in what He has made of your life. This time of waiting is not wasted, it's sacred. So ask yourself, what role does God have for you in His divine plan? Are you equipped for it? Romans 12 verse 1-2 reminds us to offer our bodies as living sacrifices, to resist being conformed to the patterns of this world, and to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. Only then will you be able to discern God's good, pleasing, and perfect will. As you reflect on these words, stay with us. Let God continue to work in your life, even through the silence. Don't rush the process, embrace it. And before moving forward, remember to like this message and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your journey can inspire others who are also waiting for their breakthrough. Together, let's trust in God's perfect timing. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at the testing point. Have you ever felt that inner push, something deep within your spirit urging you to take a step forward, even when uncertainty looms? What if this urge, this pull to act, is not just a fleeting feeling, but God calling you to move forward into something greater? Perhaps you've been waiting for a sign, waiting for the perfect moment. But maybe that moment of waiting has passed, and God is now calling you to take bold, faith-driven action, even when the path seems unclear. Could it be that your hesitation is delaying the victory God has already prepared for you? Victory in faith doesn't come passively, it requires you to step out, to move in obedience, trusting that God is guiding your every step. When God is nudging you to act, it's often a sign that breakthrough is near. He doesn't push us into the unknown without purpose. He leads us into actions that align with His plans, shaping us into who we need to be to receive the blessings He has in store. In the Bible, God asked Joshua and the Israelites to take a highly unconventional action, marching around the walls of Jericho, blowing trumpets, instead of fighting with swords and weapons. It must have seemed strange, even foolish to some. But that act of obedience, however unusual, brought down the walls and delivered them victory. The question remains, what walls are standing before you? And what is God asking you to do in faith? It may not make sense to you right now, but God's ways are higher than ours. Often, the actions He asks us to take are the very things that bring us closer to the breakthrough we've been waiting for. As Lewis suggests, it's in these testing moments that our courage and faith become the foundation of all virtues. But trust that if God is asking you to act, He has already equipped you with what you need to succeed. God may be calling you to take up a new skill, invest in a new opportunity, or step into a season of growth. His promptings are invitations to align with His kingdom purposes. As Jesus said in Matthew 6 verse 33, "Seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." By seeking His guidance through prayer, immersing yourself in His Word, and listening for the Holy Spirit's direction, you'll be able to take bold steps that lead to victory. Remember, God is your shepherd, and He promises to be your strength and guide, even when the road ahead is unclear. Every step you take in faith brings you closer to His purpose for your life. C.S. Lewis once said, "God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is His megaphone to rouse a deaf world." Have you ever wondered why moments of isolation feel so painful, so disorienting, and yet so necessary? Perhaps you're in a season where God seems to have separated you from the busyness and distractions of life, leaving you alone with your thoughts, your questions, and your fears. But could it be that this isolation is not a punishment but a divine preparation for something greater? There's a quietness in being set apart by God, a quietness that may feel overwhelming at times. But what if that silence is exactly what you need to hear Him clearly? Often, the busyness of life clouds our ability to truly understand God's direction, This period of isolation could be God's way of removing the noise, forcing you to confront the very things in your heart that have been hindering your spiritual growth. Could it be that He is pruning away the distractions, the habits, or even the relationships that no longer serve His purpose for you? Beloved, being set apart is not about loneliness, but about focus. God is positioning you for a breakthrough, for a mission only you can carry out. Like the story of Barnabas and Saul in Acts 13 verse 2-3, where the Holy Spirit set them apart for divine work, you too are being singled out for something special. Embrace this season not as an abandonment, but as a sacred time for growth, reflection, and preparation. C.S. Lewis once reflected that the work God is doing in your soul is worth infinitely more than the work you are seeking elsewhere. This is your opportunity to grow deeper, to connect more intimately with your purpose, and to be refined into the person God needs you to be for the next chapter of your life. Think about Daniel and his friends in Babylon. They were set apart, not because they were unworthy, but because they had a higher calling. They refused to defile themselves with the king's food and drink, which could have compromised their faith. Instead, they chose to honor God in their isolation, demonstrating their commitment to Him even when it was difficult. Are you willing to do the same? Are you willing to let go of what the world offers to pursue what God has in store for you? The path to victory is often a lonely one. A man on a mission doesn't take the crowded road, he walks the path less traveled, the one where only those with faith can endure. And though it may feel like you are walking this road alone, God is with you, guiding your every step. This is not the time to give up, but to press forward with even more determination. Your victory is near, and this period of isolation is merely the final preparation for the blessings ahead. So, what should you do now? Embrace this time. Let go of the things that no longer serve you. The weight you carry, the doubts, and the distractions are like stones in your backpack, slowing you down on this climb. God is pruning them away to make you lighter, more focused, and more prepared for what's to come. Stay connected to Him. Commit yourself to living a life that honors His purpose and trust that His timing is perfect. Every moment of waiting is part of the process, part of the divine shaping that will lead to your breakthrough. As C.S. Lewis profoundly stated, we are not necessarily doubting that God will do the best for us, we are wondering how painful the best will turn out to be. It may be painful now, but this pain has a purpose. Your victory is just around the corner, and when it comes, you will see how every moment of isolation, every tear, and every prayer was not wasted. C.S. Lewis once reflected, to be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. This begs the question, have you ever truly examined the grudges and unforgiveness you carry in your heart? Is it possible that your inability to release those who have wronged you is preventing you from fully receiving God's abundant blessings? The pain of betrayal, disappointment, or harm can be deep, and holding on to that pain may feel like self-preservation. Yet, in reality, harboring unforgiveness is like building walls that not only isolate you from others but also from God's transformative power. What if God is calling you to realign your heart and actions, to release the chains of the past and step into the freedom He has promised? The bitterness you hold may be keeping you stagnant, blocking the very victory you are praying for. Remember, forgiveness is not for the sake of the offender, it's for you. It is a step toward your healing, a way to clear the spiritual clutter that clouds your relationship with God. Lewis reminds us that when we refuse to forgive, we reject the full depth of God's grace toward us. How can we expect divine forgiveness when we withhold it from others? The Gospel of Matthew recounts the moment when Peter, grappling with the limits of human grace, asked Jesus how many times he should forgive. He was likely thinking 7 times was generous. But Jesus' reply of 77 times, Matthew 18 verse 22, shattered Peter's notion of limits. Forgiveness, as Jesus teaches, is boundless. It's not about keeping count, but about cultivating a heart that mirrors God's infinite mercy. Reflect on this. What is weighing down your soul today? Could unresolved hurts or lingering resentment be the foothold the enemy is using to keep you from stepping into your calling? Unforgiveness isn't the only stronghold. Disobedience, unresolved trauma, or even unrepented sins can create barriers that the enemy exploits, ensuring you remain stuck and unable to move forward. The Bible is clear: the enemy's mission is to steal, kill, and destroy. His attacks are targeted at your weaknesses, planting seeds of bitterness, anger, and fear to derail your faith. But beloved, God is not sleeping on your situation. Just as the parable in Matthew 13 describes a farmer who sowed wheat only to have the enemy plant weeds among the good crop, God promises to separate the weeds from the weeds at the right time. The enemy may be sowing discord, but God is at work, ready to cleanse and restore your heart. However, this restoration requires action on your part. It requires a willingness to forgive and to address the strongholds that have kept you in chains. It's time to release the pain, to forgive not just for the sake of obedience, but for the sake of your freedom. The enemy's greatest weapon is to keep you bound to your wounds, but God's greatest desire is to set you free. Persistence in prayer and faith is essential during these battles. Lewis poignantly stated, "Everyone thinks forgiveness is a lovely idea until he has something to forgive. The challenge is not in understanding forgiveness, but in practicing it." C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Reliance on oneself is sometimes a weakness disguised as strength." Have you ever felt like you are trying to manage everything on your own, thinking that victory is within your control, only to end up frustrated, exhausted, and empty? You tell yourself, "I trust God," but the weight of your burdens pulls you back into self-reliance, a cycle where you lean on your own plans, strategies, and community rather than fully surrendering to God's divine guidance. What if, in the act of surrendering, you found the victory you seek, not in your power, but in letting go? We often desire control, thinking that we know what's best for ourselves. The heart craves answers, quick results, and the fulfillment of desires now. But when we rely on our strength, we miss the deeper process God is leading us through, one that transforms us from within. The Bible reminds us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding." Proverbs 3 verse 5. Trust requires letting go of our human instincts to fix everything ourselves and opening our hearts to God's greater wisdom. This act of surrender is not passive, it is active faith, a deliberate release of our will to make space for God's perfect plan. Are you feeling weary from the endless cycle of trying to manage everything? There is an alternative: God's plan. Surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means acknowledging that you cannot win this battle alone. Like the Israelites who wandered in the wilderness, God promised them Canaan, but did not reveal every detail of how they would get there. Similarly, He may have given you a vision of your promised land, but the journey might be unclear. It is in this space of uncertainty where true faith grows. Lewis often spoke of the tension between our desires and God's plan, emphasizing that God doesn't give us everything we want, but He gives us what we need. Perhaps your unanswered prayers are not rejections but redirections, God guiding you towards something better, something beyond your immediate understanding. You might not see it yet, but every delay, every trial, is shaping you for a purpose far greater than the one you envisioned. If you're feeling overwhelmed, remember that asking for God's help is a powerful declaration of faith. It shows that you've recognized your limits and are now leaning into the limitless power of the Creator. When the world tells you to work harder, God invites you to rest in His grace, knowing that He fights for you. "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest," Jesus promises in Matthew 11 verse 28. Why, then, do we resist this invitation to surrender? Is it fear? Is it the desire for control? These are the internal struggles we must confront, for overthinking and relying on our own solutions lead us to burnout. Lewis captures this tension well, noting, "Pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our consciences, but shouts in our pains." The pain of waiting, the pain of unanswered prayers, these are the moments where God is shouting for your attention, calling you to trust Him more deeply. The enemy wants to trap you in this cycle of doubt and overthinking, feeding you lies that you are alone in this struggle. But here's the truth: God is with you in the battle. even when you cannot see him. The war is not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities that seek to destroy your faith. You must resist the enemy's lies by shifting your focus from fear to faith, from doubt to praise. When you lift your voice in worship, you remind both yourself and the enemy that your hope rests in God alone. Beloved, you are not called to fight this battle alone. Pray without ceasing and commit to fasting as it aligns your will with God's. Lay down your desires, your frustrations, and your fears at his feet, for he alone is able to bring the victory. Those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength, says Isaiah 40 verse 31. This waiting, this trusting, is not passive. It is an act of faith that declares God is working, even when you cannot see it. Let us pray. Wait. C.S. Lewis once said, "Faith is the art of holding on to things your reason has once accepted, in spite of your changing moods." How often do we find ourselves in seasons where faith feels like a burden, where the silence from God feels deafening, and where the weight of our waiting begins to erode our trust? Have you too felt that gnawing uncertainty in your spirit, questioning whether God has truly heard your prayers? It's during these quiet, painful moments that doubt sneaks in and whispers that maybe, just maybe, you've been forgotten. But what if this silence is not a reflection of God's absence, but rather an indication of his careful preparation? What if this very season of waiting is the place where your character is being shaped, your faith deepened, and your spirit prepared for the breakthrough that lies ahead? The waiting can be excruciating, especially when the path is unclear and your heart aches for the fulfillment of promises that seem far off. Yet, beloved, consider this: every moment of struggle is not wasted. Just as C.S. Lewis suggests, our emotions may fluctuate, but our faith should remain steadfast. God's word assures you that your victory is near, even if it doesn't look like it right now. The heaviness of expectation, the doubts, and frustrations are not signs of abandonment but opportunities for growth. God is not absent in the waiting. He is actively at work, orchestrating everything in your favor. Have you ever considered that the challenges you're facing are not meant to break you, but to build you into the person God has called you to be? Think about the biblical story of Joshua at Jericho. God's instructions seemed unusual, even illogical, yet they led to victory. In the same way, God may be asking you to trust in his plan, even when it doesn't align with your own understanding. This season of waiting is not meaningless. It is a divine process where every delay serves a purpose to strengthen your endurance, to deepen your trust, and to prepare you for the blessings God has already set aside for you. But it's hard, isn't it? The doubts feel heavy, and the waiting seems unbearable. Have you ever thought about the burdens you carry, the unresolved pain, the unforgiven wrongs, and the negative patterns that weigh you down? These are the very things that may be standing between you and the victory you seek. Just as Lewis reflected on the necessity of surrender in his life, could it be that God is calling you to release those burdens? To forgive, to let go, and to trust fully in his plan. Forgiveness is not for the person who hurt you, but for your own heart's freedom. Beloved, stay steadfast. There is no wasted time in God's kingdom. Every tear, every doubt, and every moment of waiting is a step closer to the breakthrough he has promised you. God's plan is greater than what we can see, and his timing, though mysterious, is always perfect. He is preparing you for victory, and when that moment arrives, you will look back and understand the necessity of this waiting season. So, as you continue in this journey, keep holding on to hope. Stay with us, because there is more to explore, more to learn, and more encouragement to be shared. Your faith, though tested, will only grow stronger in this process. If this message has spoken to you, don't hesitate to like the video and leave your thoughts in the comments. Together, we can support one another in these challenging seasons and trust that God's promises will come to fruition, just as he said they would.